DNA Clarity and Support. I'm your host, Brian. Listen as I chat with authors and leaders in the DNA world about the family and personal impacts of DNA testing. You'll hear news stories, unique perspectives, find out about books, websites, organizations, other podcasts for those involved in the world of DNA. Please be sensitive to younger listeners as the conversations can get intense at times. This is a production of Watershed DNA. Learn more at watersheddna.com. Welcome to the DNA and Clarity podcast, Arnold. I'm really glad that you're joining me today.
Well, it's very nice to see you and talk to you again.
It's been quite a number of years since we first connected, and then we followed up and connected a few years later. And you wrote a blog post for the Watershed blog, and Arnold is your alias, but we're going to use that name today. Okay. And I wanted to check in with you because a lot can happen in 6 years. And I wanted to ask just how things are going and get a check-in from you, because I know over the past 6 years, quite a number of people have read your blog posts. And I've gotten feedback from especially bio dads who have said it was incredibly helpful to them to have somebody in their position in a surprise DNA discovery talk about what it was like, what the emotions were like, what all the different factors that go into trying to decide how do you engage with the surprise child and how do you involve your family. And I really appreciate that you agreed to my request to come join.
Well, I won't use the word honored, but I'm pleased to be able to give you an update because as most of your viewers and your clients have all experienced, the shock and awe and the shocking discovery can play a mind game on you, and doing a search for someone like yourself who is a DNA counselor. And that's what I referred you to have, as with a lot of people, that the DNA counseling. Coming to you was probably my life-saving cord, because the first thing was, how do I tell my wife?
I remember. Yeah.
And you you were so helpful with the advice that I got from you. So if I can shed some light, use the term shed, or some DNA discovery information, it might help somebody else. Because and since my discovery, I have two friends. One is my best Army friend, Captain, male, who found a son that he never knew about. And then last year sometime, my friend that's in the Galaxy Club passed away, and his wife and I got talking, and she utterly said that her son, and I said, excuse me, what? So there's been other people, and I have shared my experiences with both of them. And my Army captain friend has shared with me how he has dealt with his. And a son versus a daughter, a lot of similarities, but a lot of differences that I have discovered myself.
Yeah. So not everybody who's listening will have read the blog post. So let's bring them up to speed a bit. So 6 years ago, you decided to do DNA testing.
I started out by wanting to do a DNA. I was trying to build a family tree. That's what led me to do what I did. And I found a cousin from my grandmother's sisters. So we would be cousins from that direction. And the cousin had said, try this other DNA site. So I tried the other DNA site. And everything was fine until up in the top right-hand corner where it says, share your DNA to look for relatives. I didn't find any on the first DNA site, but when I clicked the button on the second site, and it wasn't the very first day that I was on that site, and I sent the DNA to them, and when I got the results back, I hit that little button, and the discovery came about, I don't know, a few days later when I logged into that second DNA site, that there was an inter-app message like Facebook Messenger saying, "Hey, I think I might be your biological daughter."
And did you have any inkling up to that point in time you might have an additional child out there?
My wife and I, we had been married for 41 years at that time. And we had watched Dr. Phil and some of the other shows where people did DNA tests to prove who was the dad. And we talked about it. And because I was in the military and I was stationed in Southeast Asia during the Vietnam War, I had multiple encounters with a lot of different females. When I got discharged and I moved to Florida, before I met my wife, I blacked out everything from the war and all of those experiences. And I started a life of drugs, alcohol, sex, and country music. And I had no regard. And my wife and I, after watching Phil one night, we said, I wonder how many other children that I might have out there besides ours. And I think in my original post, I mentioned that we thought it was a joke at the time.
I remember you were
after
laughing matter.
Yeah, after the discovery, there was no more laughing. So
yeah,
it was very emotional and trauma-wise. And as I got closer to, I still had my doubts, and you and I had talked about it, that it was probably, they give you 99.999. And as the surprise went along, it was like, okay, am I maybe in that 1% that it's wrong? And I asked you for a third DNA test.
Yeah, I remember talking about that because it still didn't feel real at that point in time to you. And because of percentages, it still didn't feel like a clear-cut yes or no.
In hindsight, looking back now, I think I would tell someone, if you're at 99.99999%, you probably are the father. And I think after the third test, when I talked to you and I got the address for and I won't say the others were non-reliable. It was just, okay, you got two, they both came back. So if you go with third one, whatever. So I did the third one and it came back.
Yeah, and it was a different type of testing. That was an actual paternity test using a different technology.
That would be
that
correct.
One, you both sent in your samples independent of one another.
That is correct. Where the first DNA sites were, I did mine, she did hers, and just because, as it turns out, her best friend is the one that talked her into, wait, hit that little button up there and turn it on. So we joke about it now between us that if we want to blame somebody, we blame her friend for telling her to turn it on. And that's how the relationship has changed in 6 years. I did not know that. I didn't know that part of the story until recently.
So let's talk about that a little bit, because you are still in contact with your biodaughter.
I think it's fair to say that I'll continue with what I was just explaining. By doing the third test, I found myself, and I don't know that if it was just bad timing. I ended up with chest pains and was in the hospital and was going to have triple bypass heart surgery. So we were waiting diligently for those paternal test results. And we had talked that if she got the result or I got the result, we would let the other one know and we would discuss it. Well, The night before I went into open heart surgery, I made the decision that I had to tell her before I went into surgery, and if something happened and I didn't come out of surgery. So I called her up and told her that I did, and I said, we'll talk later. A year later, we met
in person.
She came to where I live, and I went to meet her the first night by myself. And then the next night, my wife went to meet her. And it was like a big weight off my shoulders because it went over very well. Unfortunately, my wife had a massive heart attack probably 5 months after she got to meet my biological daughter. Patty and I, my wife, we had made a decision that we were not going to tell our children.
The children you raised, which is
the children that we had between the two of us.
And a daughter. Mm-hmm.
So then my wife passed away. That was the year after, almost a year after the discovery even came out. Unfortunate. So I was left with the decision because my wife and I decided that due to stories of siblings, half siblings that don't coexist very well together, that we did not want to do that. My son, I didn't think my son would be the problem, but our daughter was going through drug treatment, and we were afraid that it was going to have her relapse if we told her. So we made the joint decision not to tell our children. After my wife passed away, for the next 5 years, or the last 5 years, I contemplated that. Do I tell now? My daughter's doing fine. Do I not tell now? Some of the things that I learned in the first DNA discovery when doing the family tree, that my mother went to her grave on her 90th birthday with stories that she didn't tell, secrets that she took to her grave with her. And I made a decision at that time that it was time to tell my children. I had come to thanks to our discussions and our talks and time, and my wife being so understanding the way she was, that it was time that I do this. So I had brought it up with my bio daughter and said, hey, I'm contemplating this. I have not told them yet. And we discussed it for a while before I actually told my children.
So you included your bio daughter in the decision-making, really, around
the decision-making through other people that I had met through the Watershed group, that we all shared stories and we all knew how somebody else was handling theirs and what are you doing that's helping you. Arnold was helping you, and the other guy's name was Tony. And it's like, okay, so, and then we met a couple of ladies, and trying to learn from the ladies' side actually helped me understand. So yes, I decided that I had to include her, and I'm really glad that I did.
Yeah. I'll just interrupt to say that I've known you since the very start of your DNA discovery, almost within days, I want to say. Was it within days after you discovered your bio daughter? And I've heard your reasons all along the way for deciding what you decided at that point in time. And they've always made a lot of sense to me. And I've felt like others who don't know all of the details might not understand why it would take so long, like why it would take 6 years for the news of a newfound child to be shared with your adult children. And I really appreciate what you've shared today, because I think it does give a little bit of insight into the position that a bio dad not expecting to be surprised later in life with a newfound child, what that experience is like and why it's not quite so easy just to.
I think one of the lessons that I had learned as my bio daughter, obviously she was adopted the day that she was born. Her mother did not even get to see her.
Her biological mother,
biological mother had not even seen her. And my bio was raised by a very good family. In fact, they also had adopted another little girl. So they and I don't know their circumstance if they couldn't have children or what, but they had two daughters. So I felt I had to include her in the decision if I'm going to tell my children, only because she shared with me that some years afterwards, when she found out she had been adopted, she went in search of her mother. And she found her mother. And her mother had two siblings. They met. But just like with me, with half brothers and half sisters, the relationships don't always work very well with each other. Some do, some don't. And knowing that, I think, is what drove me to, after my wife passed away, that I still could not decide if I wanted to tell my children, because I have two half brothers. We have the same mother, different fathers, that we're not friends and we don't talk. I have one who has the same father, but a different mother, and we have an okay relationship. I have other DNA discovered families who have nothing to do with their half brothers and sisters. And I think that was probably the number one thing, if I had to say why, that it took me 5 years after my wife passed away for me to finally decide. And I think you and I may have talked about it after I discovered this, that at some time, and I think you asked me one of the questions, do you think your children deserve to know that they might have a half brother or a half sister? And the way we discussed it, and I think that led a lot of our discussion, and then other friends of mine who they don't have nothing to do with them. And I finally decided that my choice was going to be, it's not my choice. I understood my reasons for doing it, and it's a personal choice. I mean, some people might do it, some maybe not. Most of the DNA families that I have met ended up telling their children at one time or another. And I would say that probably, if I were to calculate, probably in the neighborhood of 75% do not have anything to do with, that was before mom and dad.
You're talking about the siblings that don't have a relationship with the newfound sibling?
Yes, that is correct.
And this is based on just families or people that you've talked about?
Because I mean, I have a son and a daughter who now my son found out that he had a even though it's still a half sibling. Okay.
Your son.
My son has a stepsister. Okay. Sister, yes, but stepsister. And my daughter has an older sister that she never had.
Meaning your bio daughter, or is this
bio daughter? Correct.
Sorry, I was confused.
Thank you. Yeah. So even though, and that's where it leads a lot that people have to realize and understand, that just because my daughter has two girls by two different dads, and there's children on his side of the family that he's had after he divorced from my daughter, and they have a not so good relationship. They do talk to each other, but it's not like a real brother and sister is what they told me. It's not really it's my half sister. And they remind me of that constantly. But I still it came back to the decision when and if to tell the children. And I made the decision, okay, now is the time. And I included my bio daughter because I wanted to know, was she comfortable in the beginning?
Was it the right time for her? Because maybe if it was the right time for you and your kids, it may not be the right time for her.
That is correct. And in the beginning, while she wanted to meet my wife and she wanted to meet me, she wasn't prepared to meet my children at that time. Her half brothers and sisters. And I think that had a lot to do with her meeting, and I may be wrong, but I believe that it had a lot to do with the fact that she found them and she met them.
So your bio daughter had met her biological mother and her half siblings through her biological mother first. That was many years ago. And that was not based on DNA.
It's like, I think she was like 20 when she found them. And it's been 30 years since.
Got it. And they did not maintain contact.
No. So
your concern was like, would the same story play out in your family?
Do you tell them and get the same results? Yes or no? I don't know. But one thing that I finally did, I think that solidified my belief that the original two tests being 99.999 were confirmed without any doubt. And I would have been happy. I was happy with that. And I think she was too at the time. And I said, if you don't want to meet them, that's fine. I said, we talked about playing the what if game. What if her mother and I had got together and yada, yada, yada? Would we have gotten married? Would we have been together? Then I wouldn't have my kids now in life. And she gave me the best answer. My biological daughter gave me the best answer. Her answer was, well, maybe what if it was meant to be for me to go with her parentals, as we refer to them. Because I told her, I said, I don't want you to call me dad. I don't want to take away from the man that raised you. He's your dad. She's your mom. Okay. But it was, I think in conclusion of that discovery or that decision, I think it ultimately was right. It took me 5 years after my wife passed away for me to accept it. And then I finally accepted it because I told her, I said, look, your mother gave you up and I didn't know about you. Your mother and your half siblings disappeared after you found them. And I said, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to walk away. And she said, well, that's interesting because I always wondered why. She goes, because when I hit that button to save, you didn't have to come back because I immediately reached up and did the unshare and turned off my computer because I freaked out. It was like, she said, well, you didn't have to come back in to answer my
So
hello.
you opted into the family matching, got matched with an unexpected newfound daughter. She sent you a message. And then in that moment, you opted out of the matching. I will say this is common. This is a common reaction because.
And I think I called you and told you that, I said, oh my God, I said, what do I do? And you asked me, what did you do? And I said, I turned it off and then I was going to go back in. I went back in. I still had not accepted it and was ready to deal with it, even though our conversations had solidified my decision. When I went back on, I could have very easily just hit delete her conversation and never replied to her.
You could have, but you didn't.
I replied and I said, hi. And she must have been online because she answered right back and she said, oh my goodness, I'm so glad to see that you come back. But she told me 6 years later, when we met our kids, she even told my kids, she goes, your dad could have just said, I don't want to deal with this. I ain't going to mess with this. And he could have deleted our conversation. It all goes together. The reason why I waited and then my wife passing and why I had to wait 5 years after she passed. My bio daughter said that she was ready. She made it a very big point to tell my children that she said, I knew then a lot about my biological father and your dad, because that told me a lot that he could have just as easily just said, no, delete. I don't believe it. I don't want to worry about it. I don't want to deal with it. So she was the one that solidified that, okay, it happened for a reason. So you don't play. And she told me, she goes, I have never, ever played the what if game. I've never played the what if her mother and her step siblings would have stayed with her. Would they still be together? Well, apparently not, because they chose not to do that. But I told her, I said, I'm not going to do that to you. If you don't want nothing to do with me, then you tell me. I didn't know about you for 43 years. If you don't want nothing to do with me, then that's fine. And she goes, no. She goes, I need to know things about your medical history. And that was her reason that she told me that her friend, we won't mention her name, but her friend told her to turn on that share buttons, because if she knows that she was adopted, her friend knows that she was adopted. A lot of her family and friends don't know that her and her sister were adopted. They have their side of the secret that they don't tell. And we agreed that we wouldn't post on social media that we're related. And I think it's out of respect that we went along with it and said, okay, fine. She didn't have to come here to see me. She didn't have to come to see me and my children and to meet them face to face. But she finally, after 6 years, she finally made the decision that she was ready. And it made it really, really easy. But I still had to tell my children and how they were going to react. That is another topic.
That is another topic. Something that you started to touch on a little bit is terminology. Who's dad, who's mom, half sibling versus someone who's just a sibling. Tell me a little bit about how you've navigated what to call each other over time. And has that come up in conversation intentionally, or is it something that you've talked directly with your bio daughter about?
Yes. 8 weeks after we had confirmed the discovery and I was still recovering from triple bypass heart surgery, we met. And I think with my wife helping us, we were like, what do we call each other? And I said, I may be your biological father, but I'm not your dad. I didn't raise you. And out of respect, I don't want you to call me dad, out of respect for the mom and dad that raised you. And they did a great job of raising her, very successful businesswoman. And she says, well, what do I call you? And I said, how about? And my wife spoke up and said, okay, and here's your biological daughter, and her name is, and okay, and that's what we decided to do. And it's been that way since. She never called my wife mom because it wasn't her mother. She called her by her first name. And that's what we decided. Okay, it'll be first name only. And I mentioned earlier that I tried to use the phrase, good morning, daughter, and she wasn't ready for that.
I wasn't recording yet. So after your bio daughter came to town and met her.
And we decided by names, correct.
Yeah. You were deciding about names and like what to call each other. And was it after she went back home that you texted her a message that was related to like changing the way that you refer to her?
That was recently. That's been within the last 30 days that I sent her a text message and said, good morning, my daughter.
How did she respond to that?
She sent me back a reply text because we text a lot because of work and where she's at. So every now and then we'll do a Facebook Messenger phone chat. But she texted me back and said, I'm not quite ready for that phrase yet.
And how did you take that?
And I said, okay, no problem. I said, I probably should have asked before I did it, but it was It was just an impulse because I tell my brother good morning, both of my sisters. I send both of my granddaughters a good morning. So it was.
It didn't feel out of the ordinary for you as a person to send.
It came out of normal daily operations to say, "Hey, good morning, my daughter," and she just told me that she wasn't ready for that. And I said, "Okay, not a problem. I won't do it again." And and I've mentioned before she could call me Pops if she wanted to, but she doesn't.
Yeah, well, I think these are the little things that people don't think about until they're in this position and have to navigate these complex, like a newfound person. What do I call them? These are big.
Well, those decisions I had thought about, but had never acted on them. After we decided that didn't want her to call me Dad, I never asked, and the subject never came up about biological daughter, biological father relationship. How do you address it? We never talked about it. And it was just by chance that I did it. I want to go back to telling my children. I think it's important to know that I told my children that I wanted to we were having a birthday party for my grandson. And regarding the possibility of one day, having a sister. And I don't know where it came from with fathers with kids they don't know about. And I think it had to do with my granddaughters. One has a different father than the other. And my daughter mentioned something about, well, it wouldn't be such a bad idea if I had a sister. And I was like,
your sister, hang on, your daughter you raised.
My daughter that I raised.
Not knowing anything yet.
I guess the final decision to tell my children was that moment.
When your daughter that you raised.
My daughter acknowledged by saying, oh, it wouldn't be so bad to have a sister that I never knew about. And
so that felt like a go ahead?
Ironic enough, my friend who has the biological son was in the room. And him and I caught eyes between us. And I was like, don't you dare say a word. We did the opening and everything else. And everybody was getting ready to say goodbye. It was after dinner and cake and ice cream and everything for my grandson. And I told both my daughter and my son, and I didn't think that I did it in front of my kids, and I should not have, my grandkids. But I told them, I said, I need you guys to call me this week. What's a good day the three of us can have a family meeting?
Over the phone or in person?
In person.
In person.
I want you guys to come to my house, and I need you guys to come to the house and talk to me. So let me know what day you can come to the house. And of course, the youngest granddaughter was like, I want to come to the family meeting too. And I said, no, this is just between your mother and uncle and I. I said, I have to talk to them first. So that was about 3 or 4 days later. My son said, hey, you just tell me what day, Dad. And I said, okay, it's your sister that I'm worried about. Because 3 days later, she still had not answered me.
About when she was available to come in person. Yeah. Do you think they were anticipating something they didn't want to hear?
Yeah, when I called her, instead of texting her, I called her to ask her if she had determined when she might be available. And she said, okay, Thursday. So I kind of forced the decision on her. She said, okay, Thursday, 1 o'clock. I said, okay. She said, because I'm off that day. I have other things to do, and I'll be over at your house at 1 o'clock. So then I called my son, and I said, okay, be here at 1 o'clock. So to prepare, I had seen a lot of pictures of my biological daughter that she had sent to me that I kept in a hidden folder on my computer. And I printed 4x6 pictures. And when the kids got there, I told them that I needed to tell them. I said, I've made the decision that I have to tell you something. So I told them, and I said, before I tell you, I want you to listen to me first. And I have a few things to show you, and then I'll answer any questions that you have. And that was a smart decision to do.
To be prepared? and to bring them together at the same
To be
time.
prepared and have them together. I told them of the announcement. And watching my children's reactions, my son, he's not a very emotional guy, but my daughter, I could see, I won't say anger, but I could see flushed cheeks. And so I showed pictures. I said, okay, here's some pictures. And then of course, then she was like, oh, I can see Aunt. I said, she goes, I can see both of your sisters in her.
So she noticed the family resemblance right away.
There is a resemblance. And I said, okay, so we talked, and it actually went over very well between them. And I asked my daughter, and I said, okay, so the question for you guys now is, I'll let you tell your children
about their new aunt.
Their new aunt, exactly. And I said, I'll leave that decision up to you guys. If you want to do it with me in the room, that's fine. And if you want to do it by yourself. And my daughter was like, well, her phrase was, well, I need to process this. My son, when he left, he said, fine, Dad. That happened before you met Mom and got married to Mom. And I said, that's exactly what your mother said. When I told your mother, I said, I took her to dinner, glass of wine, after dinner, dessert. And she was like, so what's the big deal? It happened 2 years before we even met. She goes, and how many other kids do you have? And I said, your mother was just like you. She said, what's the big deal? My daughter took, I think it was like 3 or 4 days. She never answered me.
And is that out of the ordinary for her?
Well, she wanted, according to her, when she finally told me that she was okay with it and she had processed it, turns out her concerns were how to tell her 2 daughters that you got a new aunt. Because my son's wife, they got divorced, so Aunt so-and-so isn't nowhere in the picture. So she didn't know how and what they would say, and she was worried. And I said, okay. Well, it turns out she told the oldest one within an hour of me breaking the news.
And are their ages, are they like 20-somethings, teens?
Well, who, my children?
The grandchildren?
Well, the 2 granddaughters at that time, one was 12 years older than the other.
Okay.
So she told the oldest one first to see how she reacted, and she was okay with it. And then when she finally, I guess, I said, so you told the youngest granddaughter? She said, yeah. She said, I'm okay with it. And I said, okay, can you elaborate a little bit on what you mean by you're okay with it? She goes, no, I'm okay with it, Dad. She said, the only thing that upsets me is that you and Mom didn't tell us when Mom was still alive. And I said, well, that was an act of God that had nothing to do with me, okay? Your mother and I protected you. Your mother was the one that said, with what you were going through, we were worried about your relapse. Your mother was the one that said, please, we're not telling them. So I went along with your mom, and you need to understand why your mom did it. She did it for you, okay? Has nothing to do with my biological daughter, who has no kin to her whatsoever. But the biological daughter has some of your DNA, okay? And she has some of your children's DNA. I mean, you could all do a DNA test and you guys would all find out that you're related. But she's not related. She wasn't related to my biological daughter. She's related to you and your brother. And I fully understood and accepted my daughter's questions. And I answered everything that her and her brother wanted. So
this has been a really great conversation that has helped me, even me, who knows a lot of details about your situation, understand it even more. And I'm really grateful to you for coming on and talking to me today and answering my questions and giving us an update about how the past 6 years have been since the discovery of your biodaughter. Would you be willing to come back again in a future episode? And if I got some questions from the audience.
Sure. I'm retired and I get to do what I want when I want to do it. I don't have anybody telling me, other than my grandchildren telling me what I can, what are you going to do? When are we going to do this or whatever? But I'm open to another follow-up. Yes.
Well, I'm looking
forward. Again, I tell you what, I talk about you a lot. I talk about watershed DNA a lot. And I've had other people that have had a discovery and they didn't go the way that I went. They went click and turned it off and forgot about it.
And you feel like you would have missed out on something?
I think I would have if I had done that. I'm still shocked by it, I think the hardest thing is a father who did not know. If you suspected, I did a lot of really crazy things that, probably weren't done right. But does that mean that I'm punished for the rest of my life because of a mistake? No, it's not really a mistake. I didn't know about it. And that's what helped me realize after you and I talked, your very first thing was, you don't have nothing to be ashamed of. You didn't do anything wrong. You gave me the best advice. Take it slow. I'm here if you have questions. And if anybody else has questions that I might be able to help them, I'd be more than welcome to help them. So.
Great. Well, I'm glad that I could be there for you when you needed it. There's many people I've leaned on in my life, and we need each other. None of us can do this alone.
Thank you very much for inviting me to come back. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. See you, Bree.
Thank you for listening to this episode of DNA Clarity and Support. This is Brian, founder of Watershed DNA. Check out the show notes for information discussed in today's episode and head over to watersheddna.com to sign up for our email list. Never miss out on notification of new resources available in the world of DNA testing.